Hi, and welcome to the Bitcoin Effect, where we discuss current events and the social, economic, and political impact of the most sound monetary instrument ever created, Bitcoin. So much going on over the last few days. You know, Biden extends emergency powers for COVID, and even with the blockades having dispersed, Trudeau extends emergency powers and is moving to expand surveillance powers over financial transactions. The DOJ and the FBI are joining in the fun. They've got a new crime-fighting unit for cryptocurrencies that they're forming. And it's just there's just so much going on, but these are the main topics that we're going to kind of start with covering today. So I hope that you stick around and join me. I am Nate Martin, and this is the Bitcoin Effect.
What on earth got you interested in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies?
Okay, so what's Bitcoin?
Bitcoin is...
What's Bitcoin?
Inflation-resistant money.
Bitcoin is the strongest asset the human race has ever invented.
Welcome, everybody. I am Nate Martin. This is the Bitcoin Effect, and I'm looking for some good news. I really am, because I feel emotionally and mentally just overwhelmed with everything that's going on between Putin and the new announcement about, you know, him declaring a couple of cities or regions in the Ukraine as independent states. I don't even know what that means. Somebody's going to have to tell me about that. Biden just recently extended emergency powers for COVID here in the United States. But obviously the big news is that Justin Trudeau in Canada has announced that he wants to make expanded surveillance powers over financial transactions permanent. I'm going to read in the National Review from Nate Hochman a few days ago. All eyes were trained on the aggressive police sweep of the Ottawa trucker convoy this week. And now that's pretty well kind of dispersing. But the thing is, and I was watching a video yesterday that was talking about either the new chief of police or the financial minister saying, this isn't over. If you were even part of this, basically, if we caught you on camera or you even donated to the cause from either GoFundMe or however we found out that you donated, then we're going to find you and we're going to punish you, seemingly regardless of how long you were there. How much further does this go? And even like I said, the Department of Justice in the United States and the FBI are joining in the fun, and they're actually naming their new crime-fighting unit the Virtual Asset Exploitation Unit. And they're making the abbreviation for that into VAXU or VAXU. Really? Did you have to bring vaxing into this too? I mean, where do you get off actually, trying to put hey, we want you to get vaxxed. Oh, by the way, we're going to actually be monitoring your cryptocurrencies. Why didn't you just call it the Digital Asset Monitoring Unit? Because I think that if you put those letters together, that's pretty much closer to how we'd actually feel about this. So, these are what I want to kind of go over. If anybody's got opinions or input on this, you are more than welcome to come up and have a conversation with me. But in the meantime, Log, what's going on with you? How are you feeling about any and all of these topics in this whirlwind of news that's going on today?
Well, somehow I've become immune to bad news, and I'm not exactly sure how that happened, but I think it happened right around the time I really got conviction in Bitcoin, and nothing bothers me anymore. I'm just so convinced that Bitcoin will continue on its path, and it won't fix everything, but it will fix more things than we've ever seen anything get fixed in our lifetimes. And so I'm just so optimistic that none of this just brushes right off me.
Well, congratulations. I wish I felt that way, because as I take a look at this, and I had felt the same way, because in taking a look at the polls as far as the midterm elections are concerned here in the United States, I'm like, all we got to do is make it to the election, because at that point there's going to be gridlock, because you're going to have a Democratic executive branch and you're going to have a Republican legislative branch, and no one's going to agree with anybody as far as how to get things done. I'd rather there be gridlock than there be a whole lot of legislation moving in either one direction or the other, because usually when you jerk the chain one way, then whatever is on the other end is going to either get hurt or get angry. So I'm really I really am becoming concerned as far as, yes, Bitcoin will fix this, but Bitcoin can't do this immediately. And we're looking at a government that we just don't know what they're going to do next, whether that be in Canada, whether that be in the United States. And I haven't heard tell of anybody in the Western world, whether it be in Europe or anywhere else, that has said anything negative or to say, Justin Trudeau, you shouldn't be doing the things you're doing. So how is it that we as Bitcoiners, and I will actually kind of narrow that down, those of us who enjoy liberty and freedom, what do we do next? What is our next step in trying to make sure that we have liberty and freedom past January 1st of 2023?
I think it comes down to time preference, and I didn't get that from Bitcoin in this case. I was, before Bitcoin, so resigned that nothing significant would ever change in my lifetime, that now the idea that things could change significantly thanks to Bitcoin in 5 years, that's fast by comparison. So I'm just, my time frame isn't really concerned about the months in between.
And that's true, but what happens on the other side of this journey? Because is it legislative? Is it, what exactly is going to be the outcome here? Because from a lot of people's standpoint, it looks as though the outcome is not positive. We're looking at a lot of freedoms being taken away. It's like we got to look over our shoulder financially. I mean, if you don't have Bitcoin, and it looks as though with what the Department of Justice and the FBI want to do, if you don't have non-KYC Bitcoin, then they're going to chase you down too. So how do we actually get through this turmoil without actually including bullets at this? And I hate to say it that way, but that's it's Bitcoin and bullets, and it's going to be one or the other or both. And obviously we don't want to see it come to blows, literally, but it's hard to see it either not coming to that or coming to a huge recession, because again, if you start talking about within the next 5 years, that's going to be a huge adjustment economically for the entire world market. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, Milan has just joined us, and he may have a different perspective from me. So Milan, welcome to the stage.
Yeah, welcome in.
Hey, Log, how are you?
Doing well. Tell us what you think.
Hey, Nate. Thanks for allowing me to share my thoughts. Just a couple of thoughts. I am in an airport lounge right now, so if I'm speaking lowly, I apologize, but I'll try my best to be as legible as possible. So, based on your question, yeah, I don't think it should ever, even as we talk within our spaces here, we should never even hint about, any active form of violence, because that's exactly what they want. All these measures being taken by these guys, you got to look at it from a macro level, right? It's easy to focus on their individual actions, but you look at it from a macro level. People are not agreeing with their actions at large, so they're losing this fight. As the fight goes on, with time, they lose, and that is just there's no way they win this. With the moves that Trudeau made, it's in my opinion, just the way I see things, this is just, if you look at it through history, whenever governments or seats of power become tyrannical towards the people usually overwhelm it, and it takes time, but it's a coalescing event that brings people together, and people usually win. I mean, look at the Roman Empire. You can go back before that. Any place we've had despotic governments. I know it's been a little shady when it comes to the 20th century because of just the sheer amounts of violence a state can wield. But in Western democracies right now, the governments have taken a drastic step that I think that they cannot recover from. They've tolled their death knell right now, if anybody understands that reference. So what do? I think, yeah, the election is a way to do it, but it's not about legislation. We have to reform our government, and it takes time. If I had a say, if I was advising anybody, I actually despise politicians because I think they all lie. But if I had a way to advise people who are into politics and people who are looking for our support to get into politics, I would say the goal for the American people, especially, is to amend the Constitution in the next 2 to 3 election cycles. We need to have a constitutional convention that, one, solidifies our Bill of Rights, and two, abolishes the 17th Amendment so we can return the election of our legislatures back to the state level and the local level. So that's where I'm going to stop for now. I know that's a lot of words that I just threw out there. I'll yield the mic back for now.
No, Milan, you've actually touched on something that's right in my wheelhouse, because I really think that, and I've said this before on this space, Logs heard it ad nauseum, but I'm going to repeat it anyway because it's my show and I can. I think that 1913 was the worst year that the United States has ever encountered, including the Depression and World War II. And the reason I say that is because it was the mistakes that were made in 1913 that actually led to those two events. Specifically, the 16th and 17th Amendments, the 16th Amendment being the one that actually allowed for direct taxes, and the 17th Amendment allowing, like you said, Milan, for the public election of U.S. senators instead of the legislatures of the several states being able to appoint their senators, which took a lot of the power away from the sovereignty of the states themselves. So I totally agree with that. The third thing in 1913, obviously, that happened was the Federal Reserve Act, which is the biggest mistake that Woodrow Wilson ever put on the American public. So I totally agree with you. What I don't agree with, however, Milan, is thinking that we actually have to go to Article 5. Because as soon as you go Article 5, then the Constitution of the United States no longer exists. I say, yes, absolutely amend it. But you go Article 5 and suddenly you're putting together a brand new set of rules for the legislative, executive, and judicial bodies, as well as having no amendments now. You've taken away the First and Second Amendment, and now you're going to leave modern people with no understanding of the history of freedom, which I really want to go over next week. As far as philosophically, how do we deal with one another? You talk about some of the best minds that were able to put together, two of the finest documents that humans ever wrote, the Declaration and the Constitution. Is there anybody in this time that is smarter or wiser or more of a statesman than those people were? So in one regard, totally agree with you. Amend, yes, but let's not start over by going Article 5. I think that's a mistake.
Maybe my understanding of the Constitution may be wrong, so I haven't heard that before. I've always had the impression that the Article 5 was there to force that's the way to amend the Constitution, because that actually would involve the states and the legislatures the way it was supposed to be done, instead of being done legislatively the way we see legislation being passed today, as in is just a pet project of a think tank that is basically is bought and paid for a senator or a certain congressional body, and then they push their idea, and then all of a sudden it becomes law that by the time we even fight it to figure out the constitutionality of the law, it's already been implemented, it's already being appropriated, it's already been funded and in execution, and we have really nothing to show for it at that point in time. I always thought Article 5 was there to support the amendment. If you want to make a change to the Constitution, you call an Article 5. That's how I understood that. Maybe I'm wrong.
But that doesn't require a constitutional convention. You start talking about a constitutional convention, and you're having representatives from each state actually come together to draw up what would be a new constitution. The amendment process we've already gone through, obviously, a number of times. The 18th Amendment, it's a matter of a number of votes of the legislatures of states. I want to say that it's 2/3 of the states actually have to vote for a new amendment. But that, like I said, that doesn't require a convention. That requires the votes of the several states. Somebody has their mic open. They're going to correct me on that, hopefully, because I'm going off the top of my head, but I'm pretty certain that's pretty close to the truth.
I think it's 2/3 of Congress and 3/4 of the states.
I think that you're right. But there again, like I said, that's not a convention. That is to bring up a proposed amendment for ratification by the states.
Okay, then I'm good with that. That clarifies the thought process. I thank you for that.
No, I'm glad to, and I think, like I said, that those are points that need to be made. Then the question becomes: will we ever have that kind of a supermajority of public opinion and political opinion within each one of the states that we can actually start drawing up, constitutional amendments to, for my money, like I said, repeal 16 and 17. And the Federal Reserve Act, which isn't a constitutional amendment, but because that's an even tougher one to try to get through because of how many people are actually so influent. Well, they're actually making money. They get power because of the Federal Reserve Act. So how does Bitcoin kind of chomp into the power of the Federal Reserve Act? And that's simply through its use. And I don't mean just hodling it, but I think El Salvador is a great example of what can happen to a GDP and literally to the morale of a people when you have a money that isn't going to be defaced by the government because the government doesn't really have any control over it. So, I've been kind of blathering on. If anybody else has an opinion as far as these things that are going on, then by all means come up to the stage. Otherwise, Milan and I will continue having a conversation. What do you got, buddy?
Yeah, I just had I talked about initially about fortifying somehow the first 10 amendments because there was earlier this year. The president said something that really was concerning, but it never really was amplified in the news when he said, the amendments to the Constitution are not really, they're not really absolute, that kind of concerned me. So I think any amendments that we put through the Constitution has to solidify or at least state explicitly that those 10 amendments, those Bill of Rights have to be absolute. So we can't have what we had during COVID as in, just emergency powers, and then governors and petty tyrants all over the place are sitting there infringing and basically nullifying people's rights because they feel they have the power to solve an emergency that does not exist. So I think I'm not clear on this one when it comes to this thought process. However, I think that's something that really needs to be brought up on, to be talked about.
Well, not just the first 10, but the rest of them too. I mean, you start talking about the 14th Amendment, all of those ones that were important. But I think you're right. And I think that the difference between the first 10 amendments and the rest of them was that the first 10 amendments were intended to limit the power of government. Yes. Whereas the rest of them really gave the government more power. And that's where the thought process of the founders differs from the thought process of everybody else that came after them. Civil rights being probably the one difference that I could actually come up with off the top of my head that would be different from the thought process that I'm talking about as far as modern amendments are concerned. So yeah, obviously, yeah, let's just bring back the first 10 and the Constitution the way it was. Get rid of the Federal Reserve Act. Make sure that only gold, silver, and or Bitcoin is the only thing that can be considered as legal payment, and we're going to be that much better off in the process. Oh yeah, by the way, let's get rid of the income tax just altogether, and we'll just go back to consumption-based taxes.
Yeah, my last point is I think, and this is more of a statement than even anything else, the solution to Bitcoin lies from it's constitutional, not necessarily illegal. It's constitutional. The people have to make Bitcoin their own and then say, hey, this is how we want to use this. If we have it to a place where we have our rights respected by the government that we elect, that means we have to take the time and reshape the government. Then we can use Bitcoin how we want it. If not, we're going to fight a war against our own government that we somehow elected on how we want to, on what we consider money. That's just how I see the game playing out. That's how I see the board. I'm very myopic on this view, but it's my worldview. So I'll yield the mic back. Thank you for allowing me to share my opinion.
No, it's been my pleasure, and it's been good conversation. I appreciate your being up here. I think that we're hang on a second here. There we go. We're faced with a conundrum that I think that all people that are not in government face. And the question is this: do you want a dangerous freedom or a secure slavery? And what the government has done, instead of teaching us that freedom is worth the risk of the dangers involved, the risk of the messiness of free speech, because that is messy, but it's necessary. Is the risk of freedom worth it? And the answer that I think that we all in this room would say is, yeah, absolutely, it's worth it. The thing is, though, is that there are many that like the security and the seeming stability of their unknowing slavery that they're comfortable with, and they just don't want to get off the nail. And that references this. I got lost in the country one day, and I walked up to somebody's door. Old man came out, and this dog that was laying on the floor just kind of started, howling. And I won't howl, not this time. Another time, maybe I'll tell this joke and I'll howl. And laid back down. And I got to talk and getting directions from this guy again. A few seconds later, the dog rears his head up and starts howling again and lays back down. And finally, I asked the old man, I said, "Is there something wrong with your dog?" He said, "No, he's just laying on a nail." I said, "Well, why doesn't he just get up from off the nail?" He said, "Because it doesn't hurt that bad." And that's the problem right now that I think that we have, is that we just it just doesn't hurt bad enough. And it's getting to the point where I think that it's time to get up off the nail and recognize it hurts bad enough to the point that we need to get up and take the risks of freedom instead of having the security and that dull pain of the slavery and serfdom that is being kind of veiled over us with the Federal Reserve System and the centralized governments that have step by step just kind of encroached on us. I see General Boomer has entered the room, and I'll let Milan have another say because he's got his hand up. Go ahead, and hopefully Boomer will come up and have a conversation with me as well. Milan, what do you got?
Well, just a question, and you guys have a large platform yourself, Log. We have a lot of politicians that come up here. They sell their pitch. It's election season. How do we get them to understand, the solution to Bitcoin, that what we want is constitutional? Like, it's not just pushing a bill symbolically. We want this to be a way of life for us, part of our freedom pillar going forward. I mean, how do we communicate that to them so we don't get a rug, pulled from under us? They get the votes, they get the support, get into Congress, get into office, and then kind of forget about us. I don't know how to bridge that gap yet.
The one thing, go ahead, Log. I'll pipe in after
I
you.
was just going to say, it's a double-edged sword. Politicians being bought because you can be the buyer too of politicians, and when they can come to understand that Bitcoin donations are extremely lucrative, they're going to start listening to and doing what we want. So I think that I know maybe I'm just a little Pollyanna, right? The other reason that none of this bothers me so much is that we're at that fourth turning moment. So this is just stuff that happens at this cycle in history. We have big data and digitization, which was always going to lead to a loss of privacy and freedoms. We've only had like 1,000 sci-fi movies warn us about that, and it's just playing out that way. And it takes time to figure out a solution and a new framework of laws to deal with it. And a pandemic is going to also create a bunch of chaos and lead to some losses of freedom. So it's I'm not one of those people who feels like there's a cabal of evil people out to enslave us. I just think that we're at a time when there's a bunch of things that are coincidentally bad for freedom. And I think that the voters will sort it out.
I say, you're absolutely right. We are in a turning point right now. We're in a transition point, but we also have a very fleeting moment right now that if we let it slip, we can lose a lot. We'll not necessarily lose everything, but we'll be set back. We have a chance to influence the laws going forward. So I think we need to make sure that we have a game plan to influence to have that influence going forward, or else we lose it. The power structure that's in right now is not going to just give up their power easily. They're not just going to let this stuff happen. We see it already happening. They're coming up with their own versions of, crypto, CBDCs, however it is, to try to muscle the system to go into the direction they want to. Yes, there's an option that we can just sit back and let the game play itself out, but we also have to have a plan to push the destiny where we want, push the timeline where we want it to go, for lack of a better analogy on my part.
I think that we're faced with, and we always have, politics. Here's my definition. Politics is when two or more people walk into a room to get what they want to get done, and they all have equal power. And the problem with that is that the tug of war, the verbal tug of war, the negotiating tug of war, requires there to be compromise. And this is one of the reasons why I think that the 17th Amendment was one of the big mistakes, is because as the public, which is so far removed from the process of legislation and negotiation, is given the task of trying to elect its senators. They just don't know. The senators aren't really accountable to that electorate. It was a heck of a lot more accountable to the legislature, because the state legislatures at least knew what the negotiating and legislative process was. And so to send somebody to make sure that they take care of the needs of the state, there is much more accountability to that senator. And as far removed as we are from the politicians, it's very difficult to not get caught up in the spin, whichever side of the aisle you fall on. It's very difficult to not get caught up in the spin and think that everybody's just evil or they're all very tunnel visioned, because they're not. They have to realize that there's going to be some give and take, and you're going to have to vote for some things that you don't agree with in order to get something done that you need to get done, whether it be for your state or for the nation as a whole. So that's where I sit, and it's difficult for a lot of people that are emotionally driven to step back and try and be able to see that. Thank you for that. And as we have a little bit of a lull, I'm going to go ahead and take a short break and read this off, and I'll be right back. Hey, if you're listening to a replay of this episode of The Bitcoin Effect on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, thanks for joining us, and consider leaving a comment or a review saying you'd like to hear more of what we're doing here. It helps us out a lot and also helps others who don't know much about Bitcoin to discover this program. If you want to join the conversation, make sure to join me every Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or 12 noon Pacific on Twitter Spaces. Visit thebitcoinspot.net and click the link to follow at the Bitcoin Spot and watch for the link in your feed. So, as we're talking about politically, what needs to happen, or what do we do as Bitcoiners to become part of that process? These are the questions that I have, and hopefully, some more of you will have some opinions as far as what it all means, or what you're doing, or what activities you think should be done to make sure that we're going to make it to the next election, or that freedoms will continue to be able to be enjoyed as we're going through this turmoil, whether it be in Canada or Ukraine, even here in the United States. It seems to be a worldwide tension that needs to break, and we just don't know which direction it's going to break, or if they're all going to break in one direction, or it's going to start breaking in 2 and 3 different directions, and we're going to start redefining who's for freedom and who's for control. It seems very binary the way I put it, but it's hard for me to think really that there's any other middle ground between those two. So if you've got an opinion, go ahead and come on up. Log anything else that you wanted to share. I'm not afraid of a short show. So if I'm leaving people thinking, that's fine. That's what's important about this show. But if you've got an opinion about it, come on up to the stage, and I'll be glad to have a conversation.
I'm sure that we'll get at least one new person to come up and give their perspective on all of this. In terms of how does this play out with Bitcoin, gaining ascendancy, I don't know. it's, I mean, I feel like ultimately the outcome is good, but it depends on the timing. It depends on current events. It depends on which politicians come along. It depends on how quickly they realize that they have to cater to Bitcoiners to have enough money to get elected. So, it's hard to, and I don't think anybody can even predict how this plays out. I said 5 years, and maybe it's, 5 to 10, but I'm optimistic that it will resolve as it usually does. And like I said, I don't feel like there's some big bad enemy. I feel like there's just a number of forces that have come together coincidentally, and they don't push in a big trend. But I don't think the people are gonna put up with it. So I just I don't know. I'm pretty confident.
Yeah, Milan, go ahead.
Yeah, it's it. From you guys, as a thought, from your point of view, is it fortuitous for Russia to have legalized the use of Bitcoin, knowing that they're going to possibly take the actions they took today, and then they were going to face some economic sanctions? I just kind of, now thinking about it, it kind of, I won't say makes sense, but it kind of makes sense. And then also, what are the, second and third order effects of how the West now will be viewing Bitcoin? If it's something Russia is going to be using, what kind of negative things are there, negative connotations are they going to ally with that?
I don't know exactly what to think of Putin's last moves over the last 2 weeks, because they've gone from considering an industry-wide ban on cryptocurrencies altogether to suddenly, I think, what the having Bitcoin mining be a priority, and legalizing Bitcoin. And now I think I saw where Ukraine, even on the other side of that border, has determined to make Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, determine them as digital assets, and actually have a regulator to oversee the activity of that. So whether or not that was, together with Putin, or, how that all works, I don't know. But it is very interesting to see that they're literally taking on what we determined to be the freedom Trojan horse, and implement it, for Russia and for Ukraine. If they did it separately, coincidentally, okay, but it's kind of hard to see that that's actually the case with the timing, especially with the tensions that we're being told are there, which there again, that's something that we're getting two different stories. One being it's not really that big of a deal, and then the other one being there's actually rockets flying. So that's what bothers me, is that I'm really confused and don't know what news or what reporting to believe or what the amount of tension actually is, because everybody's keeping their cards close to the vest, and not knowing is the worst thing. Shane Hazel has joined the stage, or hasn't joined the stage. I just saw his blue check mark. He was right up there next to Milan, and I thought he was a speaker. But welcome into the room anyway. We're talking about the continuing expansion of the emergency acts, both in Canada and the United States. We're talking about Bitcoin in the Ukraine and Russia, and like I opened up the show with going, somebody give me some good news, because it seems like either I'm getting bad news all the time, or I'm thinking we're not going to make it to the election with the freedoms that we have, or everybody's just holding it close to the vest, and I just don't know how to interpret everything that's coming in from all the different angles that are trying to sell their news stories. Tarek, you have requested the stage. I will bring you up here just a second. And is it Tarek or Tarek? I probably butchered your name when I said it.
It's okay, Tarek. Well, however you feel comfortable with, it doesn't matter.
I'll try to remember. And you've been on my stage before. It's not as though I should have forgotten that. But welcome in. What have you to say?
Thank you. Well, you know, on the topic of Russia, I've watched a speaker, a politician, not a politician, but an analyst, and he was saying something that was really interesting, though, which explains, all this ambiguity on the relations between Ukraine and Russia, and that is because right now Russia has two neighboring countries that are NATO allies, and they don't like that. They feel threatened, so they want some sort of guarantees that they're not going to come in, but they need a guarantee that Ukraine is not going to go into the NATO for at least the next 30 years until the whole economic situation worldwide stabilizes. They want to feel secure. So that's why there's a lot of ambiguity, because like they're pulling the ropes, as we say. But now, would that really have anything to do with Bitcoin, adoption or increase in price? I really think there's absolutely not a single correlation there. If anything at all, what those officials try to do is, elude us into thinking that they are able to move the markets, or maybe orchestrating or time orchestrating certain events. But beyond that, I think it would really have no effect otherwise. That's all.
Who is it that actually thinks that, don't take this the wrong way, I'm just going to say this bluntly, who is it that's actually thinking that Ukraine in NATO is a good idea? Because I haven't seen anybody say that they should actually become a member of NATO. Obviously, from Russia's standpoint, they border Russia. They don't want a bordering nation to be part of NATO. And there are some other concerns that should concern NATO countries as to whether or not to allow them in. So I don't see which side actually benefits from Ukraine becoming part of NATO. Am I missing something in this?
You know what? If you've lived in the Middle East, you would know what it's like to have those countries surrounding you, right? I live in Lebanon, and we are in an area of conflict, whether it's through civil war or, invasions, whatever, economic sanctions as well. And it's really something critical. And it even affects neighboring countries, because there are trades, there are relations, there are military bases that would be deployed otherwise. The whole area gets affected really easily. You guys are safe, you know what? God bless you. That's good. But for the rest of the world, there's a balance that has to be maintained between the Eastern and the Western world. And that influences everyone in the middle, to be honest.
What, from your perspective, only because obviously, like you said, I've been in the United States, lived here all my life, and so I'm sheltered from much of the news that goes on in the rest of the world, because really the rest of the world isn't wrong. I'm not saying this, but this is kind of the point here, is that nobody in the United States seemingly seems that otherworldly news is newsworthy. We don't really care, and I'm saying that generally, because obviously I do, or I wouldn't be asking you these questions. But what are the tensions that really arise when you say that you're between East and West, and there's tension between the two? What are the causes of those tensions, and how do you deal with them? As being in Lebanon or from Lebanon, how do you deal with those, and what are the ramifications of being there?
Okay, see, for example, on one side we've got Israel on the southern borders of Lebanon, right? And by law, it's an enemy state by law, right? Whether you admit or not. And also on the northern side, we have the conflict in Syria that had been going for more than 11 years and just recently settled down. And you had, the Turkish army was there, the Kurdish, the Americans, everyone was fighting in the area, and people were, flooding into Lebanon. We had 3-to-1 ratio of refugees. We are Lebanon. The whole country is the size of a city in Miami, and we had to absorb all this stress, and we're already economically depressed. And so we wait on the news, on international news, to see how things will be resolved. Is money going to come into the country to help not only the refugees, but also those impacted as a result of misallocating resources that are already scarce in our country, right? And it goes into different things, because also that small country has like more than 16 political parties. So there's always this fear of getting into another civil war. And unfortunately, we have a brain drainage, because everybody here just travels and goes to some country to work and make money. And we're left with the morons who are easily driven by politics and political views. And so also the mixture of all the religion sects. We have like 16 religious sects here. between Muslims and Christians and other minorities. So however you look at it, there's always somewhere someone influencing events in Lebanon.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of that. I can't imagine the amount.
Yeah.
You know,
I have a friend. He studied political science. He said, if you can understand Lebanese politics, you don't need to go to university. That was great, guys. Thank you.
No, thank you for sharing, because that's extremely well. It gives some perspective because even in some of the spaces that I've been listening to, we consider how does Bitcoin fix this, or what is the path, and you have 16 different viewpoints or worldviews or moral codes that you have to try to negotiate through, and that's very difficult. And I don't know what the history or the political how the political structure in Lebanon has worked. I just know that there's been a lot of tension because of the things that you had mentioned, and so there's so much more to these questions than just buy Bitcoin. There's the question of philosophically, how do we deal one with another, and how much foreign interest do you actually, or how many people do you actually have to put into a foreign land to feel like you have control over your own economy? That's I'm just firing off questions here, because these are questions I don't have the answers to. On to a different, slightly different subject. I actually read, Nick Carter earlier today. He said this. I'm going to go back to Canada. Actually, is in the international sphere, sanctions are a weapon of war. Talk about Lebanon. Talk about countries in the Middle East, or talk about even Cuba from the standpoint of the United States. So, and he goes on. When the state enacts broad-based sanctions against its own citizens in the form of freezing accounts, is it not waging war upon them? And he makes a great point that if the nation or the government is ready to enforce financial sanctions against its own citizens, then what recourse do the citizens have? I'll say the word, but revolution, in order to make sure that their freedoms aren't encroached any further. Hard questions, and there again, we start talking about not wanting violence. So what other recourse do we have other than trying to have a parallel economy by using Bitcoin? And then you got to deal with the logistical issues, because, distribution has to be involved in that. Manufacturing has to be involved in that. And these are, how does this all happen? And, I've said this before, without huge recessionary pressures, because nobody knows what they're going to be spending money on or how much money they want to spend, because they don't know how much they're actually going to have. Everybody's going to be hodling anything that they have as far as their resources are concerned. Like I said, give me some good news, because I'm just kind of going off here, and I'm drinking coffee, and I should have something a little stronger, seemingly, because I'm just kind of going, what are the answers? And I'd love to hear some of what, and Log's laughing at me about these, but these are the things that I think about. They don't keep me awake at night. That's the coffee, but these are things that I think about. So if you have opinions on these, by all means, shout them out. Also, my DMs are always open. So if you've got feedback or suggestions for this show, I want to make it better for you. I don't want to just kind of be, going off at the mouth here and telling you what my innermost thoughts are. I'd like to hear from you as well and find out what would make this show better for you guys as well. So if you've got those, go ahead and DM me. If you like what I'm doing, throw a few sats at me on Twitter. You can use this account, or also at strike.me/Nate Martin. But it's always a pleasure to be able to express my opinions and my feelings and get some of your thoughts and perspectives as well, because that's how we all learn. Log, any other thoughts? It seems as though everybody is either content to listen to me or having fun listening to me kind of go off and try to stretch and laughing at me in the process. Hey, look, I don't know, but that's, we're all good.
First of all, don't take lack of audience or audience participation personally, because something else is going on there too, and that is that people have just gotten kind of demoralized over not having that that blow off top, and I continue to see the stats, right?
Sure.
So through last year, if I sent out a tweet from the main account, TBS account, I'd have like over 5,000 impressions within a few hours. I sent out a tweet this morning. There's like 500 impressions. So the audience is 90% gone, and they'll be back when Bitcoin's back over 50, over 60. But I will say, like, you did have a really good audience going last week.
Yeah,
So,
it was true.
yeah, sometimes you just don't know. It's just kind of random.
Yeah, and I've been doing this for 2.5 months as far as the live Twitter Spaces is concerned. So this is still kind of new to me, and I don't have a broadcasting background. I really don't. If you're familiar with me from 99 Bitcoins, that really literally is editing the script, putting it on a teleprompter, reading it into the camera, and then sending it off to graphics. That's what I did. And that's how I learned Bitcoin. That's how I learned Bitcoin. And so I'm learning along with everybody else. And for me to have the ability to have a platform to be able to share thoughts and share conversations so that we can all learn together, it's a blessing to me. So Tao, welcome to the stage. It's been a while since you and I have spoken. What have you to say?
Hey, Nate. Hey, Log. Yeah, that demoralized feeling that you're talking about, Log. It's bad. It sucks for people who has to feel that way, and they should not feel that way, because if they know the bigger picture and they understand the fundamentals, they actually are very happy with the current situation. It's just that moment, this short period. Supposedly my USD value is lower than what I have. And that's really missing the point. That's completely missing the big picture about what this is about and where this is going to ultimately go. This moment is your chance, your opportunity. And I think we're actually at the accumulation phase. And so people who can should definitely continue to accumulate. I feel bad for people who are in this sort of mode, and maybe that's probably why people don't talk as much. But for me, just to let people know, I am still super bullish. I'm continuing to accumulate, and I'm spending my, some of my free time. I love to continue to educate, learn myself, and listen to great spaces like this. And Nate, you're doing a great job, by the way. The way you do it, it's the most sort of broadcasting type of space that I've heard. It's just the way it flows. It's really neat. It's really something that I like listening to. I feel it's actually very professional, to tell you the truth. So good job what you're doing, Nate.
Well, I appreciate that, and I've really tried to emulate.
And just to add to that is anybody who's feeling like down in the dumps. Hey, let me just give a quick background, if I can. I got into the digital acquisition space, quote unquote, digital acquisition space late 2020, around fall of 2020, and Bitcoin was not even my first purchase. I really pivoted hard into Bitcoin, I believe, in December of last year, and I am thankful right now. I know some people are down the dumps because of the price or whatever, but I am thankful right now the price is where it is and not higher. So I'm trying to stack as much as I can because I know it's only going to go up. So, have some, be positive. It's going to be better. The future is brighter. And I think no matter what's going on, all the craziness going on in the world, we are going to get what we want. We are going to win this fight of us versus the elites. They pitted themselves against us. They lose. So that's all I got to say.
It's funny because the last thing on my mind today was actually the price. That was the last thing, because I know that I'm going to hodl. I know that Bitcoin is finite, and I know that it's the best measuring stick of value on the planet. So that didn't even bother me. It was just a matter of, what are the circumstances that we're going to go through? And maybe this is just part of the process. Maybe this was inevitable, and if that's the case, and this opens more people's eyes to what the monetary system and what the political system looks like globally, so that changes can be made and more dogs get off the nail, then good. I suppose that we can't just go, we're going to be comfortable all the time, because if we're comfortable all the time, then nothing's going to change for the better either. So I will take that for positive. Thank you for that, because like I said, it wasn't the price of Bitcoin that even, I looked at it and went, okay, so we're at 37 again, no big deal. it's going to go up eventually because of what it is, and because of the fact that we're still early. So many more people haven't even heard about Bitcoin, which brings us to the fact that we need more educators. We need more people, even in person. It's not just about being in front of a camera or a microphone and trying to teach people, because they're not necessarily looking for Bitcoin, especially at this price. So it's just a matter of having conversations one-on-one, or, wherever you are, and getting people to actually think about what their future looks like monetarily and politically. And from there, it's a lot easier to orange pill them. It really is, because once you understand what Bitcoin is and what fiat is, and you compare the two, there shouldn't be any more conversation. You should be pulling out your phone, showing them how to pull up, how to download a wallet and how to buy themselves some Bitcoin. It really is. You're right. It really is that positive. So thank you for the encouraging words. I do appreciate that. And thank you, Tao, for for saying what you said about this show particularly. All I try to do is emulate the morning show guys that I used to listen to growing up as a kid, and make it so that it's entertaining and valuable and engaging for everybody who chooses to be in the room. So thank you for that. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, I think this Canada situation is really highlighting the need for a decentralized money. It's, like they say, right? It's like almost the best marketing for Bitcoin, although Bitcoin doesn't need that, but it actually really highlights the need for something that people need to be able to hold themselves. And I like the price is not reflecting that sort of thing, right? But I just think it's a matter of time where people see that and get, and it's like a great example to use when you actually talk to people. Like, I never got into that because that was like another issue, but I've been actually orange pilling more people recently, and it was a great 2-hour conversation with them. And these are people I've actually talked to about 4 years ago, but they finally already stacked sats, and they're like, oh, why can't Strike give me a higher limit so I can stack more? Because every time they are able to deposit their max, they immediately just smash by the whole thing, and they want to get more. And I'm like, okay, don't worry, But like, we had a great conversation a few days ago just to start the first step down the rabbit hole. And so, I had a great conversation with them. Just talk about money. That's it. It was not even Bitcoin. Just talk about money, like, to get them to start thinking about what money is. And I went through the properties with them. And I said, look, we're not even talking about Bitcoin. Just talk about these properties we're talking about, right? Durability, portability, divisibility, scarce, things like that, right? Just slowly talking about them, and then giving them examples of, how it evolved from those elements to go blah, blah, blah. And then after all that, once they were really kind of, okay, now I understand why it is important to have these sort of properties, then introduce, and I just literally say the word, now let's talk about Bitcoin being the best money ever in existence in human history. And why? Well, let's go to those properties that we just talked about, and let's go through each one and why Bitcoin has those properties, and it's so much more better, and why those properties are so good in Bitcoin. And then, that literally like went down a rabbit hole, and then they were already so convinced of like, okay, well, hurry up and help me set up my cold storage, because they want to get their sats off of Strike. And I'm like, okay, yeah, we'll get there, one step at a time, just so you got to understand. But yeah, I just think that situation in Canada, I've never been in a time where like of course I don't experience it directly, but I hear about only, like I say, Cyprus and the Greek banks, things like that, right? But like to really be more involved in this sort of like geopolitical situation and paying attention to it more, it just like, I just can't believe it. Like, oh my God, I'm in the middle of this and I'm seeing it, and I know people that are over there that I communicate with, and they tell me stuff. So this information that's happening, it's just mind blowing. Like, oh my God, this is actually really happening. We're not joking here.
Right.
We're not joking there, right?
And the information that we are gathering, here's what the invention of Bitcoin has done. It has thrown a wrench in the system that would keep us in the illusion that fiat is the right money. Because if it's done nothing else, it has made it so more and more people are learning about what money is, how it works, and why currently it's not working. And an informed public is certainly going to do a heck of a lot better against politicians that are trying to keep the veil over their eyes than an uninformed public. Seriously, if the invention of Bitcoin only did that, then we're still going to be better off. Power in Bitcoin has joined the stage. Welcome in. What have you to say?
So I have a question, a conundrum that I run into in the office all the time. I have individuals, they've been successful in, playing, obviously not playing, but investing in the current stock market, and very, 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 I won't say anti-Bitcoin, but very resistant to even talking about it, because it's like, I don't understand it, so I'm not going to put money into it. I don't even know how to broach that conversation, just trying to even talk about like, hey, what do you think about this? I don't know if anybody else out there faces the same type of, not necessarily an issue, but has the same type of interactions.
I would ask them the question right away. I would say, do you know how the dollar works? I get crickets all the time. I don't know how Bitcoin works, so I'm not going to invest in it. So why do you take the dollar? Do you know how the dollar works? But you take it in your paycheck every week. Why do you do that? And it leaves them with no answer, which opens them up to listening to what the difference is. That's my tack. Somebody else had something they wanted to say about that.
Yeah, my approach after like many, many times, I've been trying to talk to people for 4 years, and the only thing that has seemed to work is when they are available and it's, hey, let's just talk about money. When I start talking about money and ask them, hey, do you know like kind of what money is? Not just your paper dollars you have in your pocket and you go to. As far as all you think about money is you have this paper dollars in your wallet, and when you go to a store, you give that to somebody, and then you get food or you get a product, and that's as far as you know about money. But aren't you curious about, well, where does this come from? How does it come out to in existence? Don't you think beyond that, right? And once I'm able to kind of get them to the yeah, that's true, and they have to. It's hard for people to admit that they don't know, because it's almost as if it's like a dumb question, like, oh, you don't know what money is, sort of thing, right? And so they don't want to sort of admit that. But once you're like, hey, no, it's not an easy concept to understand, because they don't teach you this in school, right? They don't teach you these sort of things in school. And even if they did, like, you still wouldn't think it from that level. So once they get intrigued and say, well, okay, let's just go through it. When they get intrigued by that, they start to say, okay, now they understand money. And then we introduce Bitcoin in that context, then they started getting into that. When I try to do it the other way, where, I'm talking about all the amazing technology and what it does is so amazing, it may go over their heads a little bit, because it's like, don't talk to them about blockchain. Don't say those words. Don't say blockchain. Don't even say miners and things like that. Don't even mention that. Just go from the basic, and slowly you're like, this is why Bitcoin's better. Then that's when you start adding little pieces, like, well, why? Well, this is why. And then you add on, because for people who are new to this space, you guys know there's a lot of things to absorb. And so people need to take little crumbs here and there slowly, just like how we did, right? We slowly learn piece by piece. And so we can put all the pieces of puzzles together, right? Okay, we see this really beautiful picture of Bitcoin. So that's the way I would approach it. Simple, and then slowly add more.
Yeah, Tarek, what do you got?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. Yeah, so on those words, Tao, I would like to give a counter argument, though. As someone, and I say this as someone who's studied economics and who's dedicated to the bitcoins of the economics of Bitcoin. God damn it! And I don't expect people to go into the nitty-gritty details of economics and understanding Bitcoin and the value of it, but also the same way so many economists have failed to explain it as well. But what I'm trying to get into is the fact that there had been a lot of hype and people had been going with the flow, believing everything they're being told without cross-checking facts, things that are easily and accessible for everyone for free on the internet, things that you can double check or prove to yourself. And that's the beauty of Bitcoin. People had not been doing the homework they have to do. And that's why this have created a lot of dependency on the source of information that people is getting. And that's why they could not convince honestly, I consider them smart investors because they want to understand what they are putting their money in. They are not driven by the profit maximizing mentality or the need to maximize profits. They are driven by rationality, and these are actors that will be beneficial in this space, and they are probably the last to enter. And if they are the last to enter, that's because we've been failing to explain it properly to them, to give them the technical answers they're looking for. Because honestly, financial liberty and financial freedom coming from majority who have their wallets KYC'd with an exchange, that doesn't sell me, you know. I want the details, and we're not able to provide that. All we want to do is hype up the markets, be happy, and when things turn around, we just go to the dark. Has been happening again. You know what? Bitcoin has not done until today anything that it has not done before. Everything had been there, and as Nate said, you know what? It's part of the process. It is part of the process.
So we're going to. It's been one of those days, and Log, thank you for letting me know. It's not me. It's the fact that sometimes people just they don't want to come up, and I appreciate that. Tal, thank you. I appreciate it. You know what? It happens. It happens. But I do want to thank you, Tao and Tarek and Milan, for coming up and sharing with me today. It's been an interesting discussion. I certainly am going to go back and re-listen to a lot of what was said. But keep your head up. You guys have helped me in keeping mine up as well. We know that the price doesn't matter. We know that Bitcoin is still the best money that there is out there. We still have a lot of work to do as far as educating people first, I think. And I think that the way that to do it is to just continue having the conversations about money. And the more that we do that, the more that we're going to have people that are going to be receptive to what Bitcoin is, and they'll begin to interact with the network, with the money, and with the people, and with what will become the economy that Bitcoin is. So make sure to be on Twitter later today for This Week in Bitcoin with Mark Goodwin and the Art Bank at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time, 4:30 Pacific, followed by Bitcoin Made Simple with Corey and Luke at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. If you've enjoyed the conversation, hey, think about dropping a few sats on Twitter tips or on strike.me/Nate Martin. Also, want to make this show more enjoyable for you. I want to make sure to let you know that my DM is always open for feedback and suggestions. I want to thank everybody for joining me. We're going to go ahead and call this an episode. Make sure you join me next Monday, 3 p.m. Eastern, for the Bitcoin Effect. Thank you, everybody.